Why do I keep coming back to Vancouver? Is it because of the environment? Is it because I have family and friends over here? Is it because of the job opportunities? It's definitely not because of the cost of living. So why? Now, having traveled to 25 plus different countries and having lived in Asia, other parts of Canada, lived in the US, and of course Vancouver, what drew me back to Vancouver? Now, before this video, I spent countless of hours just researching, trying to figure out what are the important questions that people that are considering moving to Vancouver would want answers to. And it was honestly really difficult. There were so many questions and I kept changing and trying to cut down. But eventually I narrowed it down to these 6 topics, these 6 questions. And in this video, I'm gonna be sharing my story, my thoughts, my reasons, and the experiences and all that good stuff regarding these 6 topics. So now without further ado, let's go. All right, so let's start off by talking a little bit about my story. Now, of course, as many of you know, I'm a real estate agent here in Metro Vancouver, but today it's gonna be a special one. There's no showing houses, there's no giving you stats about the market. I'm gonna do my very best to take off that realtor hat and just give you an inside perspective as someone who's a young adult here in Vancouver, as someone who's part of the community, as someone who's used to constant change and have chosen to settle down here in Vancouver. So for starters, I grew up and I was born in Taiwan in Asia, and I spent 7 years of my life in Asia, and throughout the course of my life since, I have visited many times. And so that was quite a drastic change, moving from Taiwan here in Vancouver, English being my second language and being in a completely new environment. And then throughout from ages 7 till current, I've spent quite a lot of time in Vancouver, and predominantly this is the place where I grew up really. But some years down the line, when I was around 15, I moved to Montreal and spent a couple years there. And then after that, I actually went to Austin, Texas in the US, where I attended University of Texas, and I spent the next 5 years of my life in Texas. And after that, I was in a weird stage of my life where I was faced with a fork in the road. Am I going to go back to Asia? Am I going to stay in Austin? Or am I going to come back here to Vancouver? And I guess to answer the question, why did I travel to 25 plus different countries? Growing up, I competed in professional tennis, and throughout my life, that was what I was doing pretty much. And I would travel all throughout the world to play and compete in different tournaments. And so that really opened my eyes to all the different environments, different surroundings, different areas, and what their lifestyle was like. And of course, having spent more than a couple years in quite very different areas of the world, being Asia, Vancouver, then Montreal, then Texas, I really got to realize and learn about what I liked and what was important to me in a place that I do want to end up settling in. And so that is a bit on my story. I actually have my notes here to make sure I don't forget anything, but let's move on to one of the first 6 questions that we'll be answering and that I'll be sharing today. And the first one is, how expensive is it to live in Metro Vancouver? Now, I think it's pretty fair assumption that everyone watching this, if you've done any sort of research or seen any sort of news, you would know that Vancouver is notorious for being an expensive place to live in. Now, I know I said I'm not going to talk too much about housing and stuff, but that is of course a big subject in regards to the cost of living. So I'm just going to give you some quick numbers for a bit of an idea. So across all of Greater Vancouver, and across all bedroom types, the average condo price here is around $750,000. And if we take a step up to the average townhouse price, that is around $1.1 million. And then for a detached home here throughout Greater Vancouver, the average price point is around $2 million. Now, like I said, we're not gonna get super into all the numbers and stats and stuff. I have plenty of other videos that do go into that if you're interested in checking that out. But like I said, those are averages, and it really does depend on where you live. If you're in downtown, or at least close to downtown, of course the prices are going to be quite a bit higher, and general rule of thumb, the further east you go, the more prices will decrease. And so of course that's up to you in terms of lifestyle. Do you want to be in the downtown, the midst of everything, or do you don't mind being out in the suburbs further away so that, you know, you can, just a personal preference kind of thing. And then if we go into other areas of cost of living, for example, gas, I can't speak for everyone. Some people now have electric vehicles, but for me, I drive a gas car and I do drive around quite a bit, quite a lot. And per week, I would say on average, I fill up once a week and a half. And each time I fill up, the cost is around $100 Canadian dollars. Well, 100 Canadian dollars. And in terms of grocery, now, I've lived in so many places and shopped at so many different grocery stores. I haven't actually sat down and done real conversions, so please note that this is just based off what I feel. But I do think grocery, it's pretty fair here. I did most of my grocery shopping, I would say, in Texas and then now here in Vancouver. And I don't know if it's true, but I do feel, especially if you go somewhere like Costco here, that grocery may be a little bit cheaper than it was in Texas. Granted, I was going to Whole Foods, so I know that is probably one of the bougier places to shop at. But I don't personally feel like groceries here is through the roof expensive or anything like that. Especially, like I said, if you go to Costco and buy in bulk, or even if you go to like Save on Foods or something of that sort, it really isn't that bad in my opinion. Now, going back and touching a bit more on housing, and this time on the rent. Rent is pretty expensive here, and as you can imagine, if you are downtown, renting a one-bedroom condo can be easily above $2,000 a month, and so that is quite a heavy load, especially if you're trying to start your career, if you're single and you're the only one that's taking care of the rent. It does eat up a lot into the money you're making. Now, how much do you need to earn? That really depends, like we said, a lot on where you live and on your income, or like I said, if you're single, if you have a partner that you can kind of offload and share their expenses, that could be play a huge role in how much you're actually expensing per month. So that about covers how expensive Metro Vancouver is. If I go into every question that I found on my research, this video would be like 3 hours long. So we're not going to do that, but we are going to move on to the next question, which is, what is the weather like? Now, of course, Vancouver is notorious again, and everyone knows this, for getting a ton of rain. That's why we have the nickname Raincouver, and I will say that is absolutely true. Not even going to argue that one single bit, because that is just a hard fact. I don't know the actual number of days on average that it rains per year, but I know it is incredibly high. But I do also want to take a second to just kind of compare the different climates, having been in very drastic, very different climates. Asia being incredibly humid, Vancouver getting a lot of rainy days, Montreal getting a ton of snow and the longest of winters I could even imagine, and then Austin, Texas getting one of the most extreme summers in terms of heat and just consistent day after day temperature I've ever experienced, like I said. How does Vancouver compare to those areas? Now, Vancouver, I would honestly just put right smack down in the middle, because half the time throughout the year, it is actually incredibly beautiful. In the summer months, you don't get extreme heat. It's very nice. You have good sun. You get to go to the beach, enjoy the nature. But then if you take the fall, the spring, and of course the winter months, then you're getting a lot of rain. And in terms of snow compared to the rest of Canada, so if we take Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto, Quebec, Vancouver is more mild in winter months. So that means we won't get as extreme snowstorms, as extreme low temperatures, which, having lived in Montreal for 2 years, when you wake up, everyone gets up an hour extra early just to go outside and start scraping their car turning on their heater in their car, and I guess it's kind of a vibe if you go outside and everyone in your neighborhood is just scraping away. But honestly, I did not enjoy that too much, especially I didn't own a pair of boots that went much above my shin. So every day I'd be trying to find the spots that people have walked through already just to get out of the whatever 2 feet of snow. And so that was pretty extreme. And then if I take Austin, Texas, in the summer months, you really can't do much outside. It is extremely hot, and the second you walk outside, you start sweating. During the afternoon times, it gets to 40 plus degrees Celsius pretty much every single day. And that heat really goes up until end of October even. That's kind of the date that I remember there start to be a shift and the weather starts to cool off a little bit. So Vancouver, compared to those areas, I would just put it as more mild, less extreme in either side. But then I guess perfectly suited for the mild temperate climate would be rain. And like I mentioned again and again, we do get a lot of rain, and that does affect, I would say, your mood sometimes, because the day feels kind of gloomy, it feels a little dark. So really there's pros and cons to everything. So just kind of up to you in terms of what you like. I know some people that can't stand rain, so probably this would put you into depression, but some people also hate the heat. So Texas, something of very warm climate, would probably be difficult to live in. And then Montreal, of course, you're getting winter months and a ton of snow for a third of the year. And now, I think that's enough on weather. We're going to move on to the next topic, which is how bad is the traffic and do you need a car to live here? So Vancouver's traffic, again, very much dependent on where you are, and just like everywhere else, at what time are you driving. Traffic in general, I'd say, would be not the greatest, but also not the worst. And I say that because, for example, if we take Vancouver, most times, even outside of rush hour, I would say a lot of times it is pretty difficult to drive in Vancouver. There's a lot of traffic lights and smaller, more narrow roads, a lot of cars. So in turn, you're gonna have pretty bad traffic for a lot of the day. And then throughout Metro Vancouver, even in the suburbs, there are certain hotspots where when you hit rush hour, everyone's trying to go in and out of that area. And a lot of times there's only so many roads and streets that lead you onto the highway, for example. So you do have to go through certain areas, and that causes congestion, of course. So, but then there's a lot of parts that really you don't face too much traffic, especially out in the suburbs. Roads are wider, less cars, and so driving really isn't that difficult. So if I had to give it a rating, I would say probably like a B to B minus. It's not great, but I don't think it's that bad either. I personally drive a ton and all throughout the place. And yeah, sometimes you add 20, 30 minutes to your day. So it's really not that huge of a deal personally. And I think that traffic is just one of those things that's also very hard to escape, really wherever you go, unless you just live completely out in the suburbs. And then in terms of, do you need a car? For a lot of Metro Vancouver, I would say you don't. But there's a caveat that you have to live somewhere that has pretty easy accessibility to transit. So the easiest thing would be to live close to SkyTrain stations, because the SkyTrain station here is so well connected that it could take you almost anywhere if you are able to get access to a SkyTrain station. And even if you live a couple blocks, couple minutes, 5-10 minutes away, the bus system is also pretty good. So if it's well connected enough, you can take one bus to the SkyTrain, and then from the SkyTrain it can take you to a lot of places throughout Metro Vancouver. Now, if you cross the bridge over to the Fraser Valley and onwards, that's kind of where the SkyTrain system ends. I know they are, of course, trying to extend that and expand to cover more areas, extending from Surrey onwards into Langley, for example. But of course, Langley, if we take Langley, Surrey, they're so large and it's hard to cover bases for all throughout those areas. But if you live somewhere in Vancouver, if you live in one of the closer suburbs like Burnaby, even if you go out to Coquitlam, which is like a 30-40 minute drive from Vancouver, even out there, if you live close enough to a SkyTrain station, there are many convenient areas. Again, let's take Coquitlam. You have Coquitlam Center close by. You have all your shopping, all your dining right around where you live. And of course, the SkyTrain station is right there. So if you pick correctly and really do your due diligence and figure out how easy and accessible the transit system is, a lot of times I would say you don't even need a car to do your daily regular activities. So moving on to the next topic is school and education. Now, there are some big universities and schools here. Of course, there's University of British Columbia, there's Simon Fraser University, there's British Columbia Institute of Technology. Those are some of the more larger universities and undergraduate studies. And they're pretty popular. I know quite a few people that have come for those schools from outside of the province or even outside of the country. So those are some great schools. And throughout Metro Vancouver, the school system for elementary, middle, high school, stuff like that, they're also very good. I think probably above average in Canada. And if we take Burnaby specifically, they have an A school ranking rating system, and they're far above average in Canada. So there are a lot of tremendous schools all throughout Metro Vancouver. And of course, I went to school here growing up, never had a problem. Everything was good. Not gonna get into what kind of classes I took and whatnot, what the teachers were like, schools were like, but everything in terms of education was good. Now, the most important thing, I think, and I'm speaking to a lot of the parents here, is safety. And I'm not going to get too much into the stories and all that news about schooling in the US, but I will say in Vancouver, in Metro Vancouver, a lot of kids, they walk to and back home from school every single day. And for me, that says a lot, because as a parent, if you want your kids to walk to school and back from school every day, you need that confidence, you need that comfort to know that it's safe and it's safe for them to do so, nothing's going to happen. And I think that says a lot about the safety and lack of crime of majority of the neighborhoods here in Vancouver. There are a few spots throughout Metro Vancouver that are probably more dangerous. If we take, of course, East Hastings, many of you will know about the homeless population there and the drug use. And then there's some areas in Surrey that are also probably a little bit higher on crime and stuff like that. But majority of the part, if you take a lot of the suburbs especially, it's so quiet, it's very peaceful, it's very safe. There are a ton of school options, so it's not that far away from most places that you're going to live. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I want to mention, is that just having the confidence and comfort, again, of letting your kids be able to walk to school and back home. That says a lot about the safety of the neighborhoods here. Okay, so moving on to the second to last topic. This one is on what's the job market like? Now, this is a pretty big topic, and I could probably make a whole video on this, but we're gonna try to just give you kind of a summary here. Overall, Vancouver job market is strong compared to most other Canadian cities, and that's due to its diverse economy and steady population growth. Now, definitely it's not as big or as strong as some larger American cities. Take New York, San Francisco, Seattle, stuff like that. But that's because those areas, they have larger job markets, higher wages, and all that good stuff. But in terms of what kind of industry here, let me give you a bit of a breakdown. I guess before we get into that, the job market here is strong, but it is competitive. It depends, like we're gonna get into what kind of industry you're in for sure, but the high cost of living means there are more people that are going after the same high-paying jobs. So now, some of the industries with good job opportunities, I'm gonna name off a few here. Tech, it's growing fast. Film and media, which production are in high demand here. There are a lot of movies, a lot of shows being filmed in the Vancouver area. Healthcare, there's strong demand for that. There's a lot of demand for nurses, doctors, and all that medical field, all the workers in the medical field. There's a lot of demand for that. Construction, of course, the ongoing need for housing and infrastructure, there's a big demand for that. Green and sustainability, now Vancouver is a leader in clean energy, sustainable construction, and all that stuff. And so that is another industry where there are a lot of job opportunities. And the building codes here, touching on efficiency a bit, they're improving and advancing their building codes for more efficiency constantly. So that's one thing to note, I guess. Now, the industries with fewer job opportunities and more competition, those include finance and banking. There are fewer high-paying opportunities compared to, for example, Toronto. And of course, we don't even have to mention like the New Yorks and San Franciscos like we already have. There's limited manufacturing and heavy industry opportunities compared to cities like Calgary and Edmonton. Corporate and headquarter jobs corporate and headquarter jobs, there are fewer large corporations based in Vancouver. So in turn, that means fewer executive level roles. Legal and consulting, it's a competitive market. There are few big firms compared to, again, Toronto and big cities in the US. So those are some of the industries that are probably more competitive than others. But the tough part here is, of course, the gap between the salary and cost of living. And if we take other cities, they are very expensive in cost of living, but their salary are also stronger and higher paying. And that's something I think a lot of people struggle with and complain about here, is that big gap of salary and the cost of living and actually being able to afford regular needs. So now moving on to the last point, what's the community here like, and safety? Now we covered a lot about safety already, and so I think we can leave that to the side a little bit. And how about the community? I would say, and this is something I've said to quite a few people, is if I were to take the US, take Texas because I spent a lot of time there, and Vancouver, what is the community like? What are the people like? I would say Texas people are very friendly. You could be walking down the street and suddenly just strike a conversation with someone that you've never met before, and turn out you guys are going to be long-term friends. You know, the people there are very friendly, they're very welcoming. But when I take Canada, I would say, or Vancouver, there is less of that. It also, I'm going to touch on this in a second, but in Vancouver, I would say the people are a little bit more closed off, not as warm as Texas, like I just mentioned, but people are very respectful and nice. And of course, that's a stereotype, is that Canadians are very nice, and I think that is accurate and definitely a stereotype for a reason. People are very nice here. They're not going to bother you, get in your way. But I guess that goes hand in hand to the friendliness. They're also not going to get out of their way as much to strike up a conversation or something of that sorts. And in terms of the community, which is kind of funny, there are different areas, geographical areas I'm speaking throughout Vancouver, where there's a dominant community or ethnicity that has a large or popular group. And so if we take, for example, Richmond, there's a huge Asian population there. And then if we take Surrey, there's a huge Indian population there. And just all throughout Vancouver, there's different segments and areas where there's a strong community in terms of ethnicity and background. But in terms of just general community, if we take churches, there are a lot of great church communities here. And personally, speaking on experience, moving back from Texas and deciding on Vancouver, it was, after being gone for so many years, it was almost like, in a way, starting from scratch. There are the few people, the very close friends that you stay in touch with, but the rest, it was almost like I moved back into a new area. And so I would say in the start, it was a little bit tough in the sense that you have to be the one to initiate. You have to be the one that puts yourself out there and goes around different communities and want to be part of communities. But now, having been back here for however many years since, I have found a lot of communities, and it is very great. My church community is fantastic. You can meet a lot of great people in that. You have community, friendship, and all that. There are a lot of different, if we take run clubs, for example, that's another community that I absolutely love and have been a big part of, which I enjoy a lot. So if you put yourself out there and actively try to be a part of something more, something bigger, part of communities, you will be able to find welcoming communities where the goal, of course, is to find some great friends and companionships for you to spend a lot of your time with. So that's a bit on the community. And I guess to wrap things up, what was it like when I first moved back? And I think there is a psychology behind the change and wanting to find familiarity, because that is something I noticed right away. Each time I moved somewhere different, it was like, oh wow, this place is so different. You're just trying to look for things you're familiar with, things that you can relate with. So I think that's important, you know, in speaking back a bit on community, find something that you enjoy doing, whether that's sports, whether that's music, whatever the case may be, and find a community and where you have a shared interest. And that's a great way for you to, you know, kind of fast forward that sense of lack of familiarity. And then, you know, I just want to also make a note that for people that are considering a move here, maybe you come here for a visit, your first impression is never as good or as bad as it's going to be. So maybe you come here and you're like, wow, this is amazing. That will eventually probably die down a bit. I know a lot of people that move here recently, they're like, wow, the nature here, the scenery, it's beautiful. But then if you ask someone that's grown up here, they're like, that's just normal and I'm used to this. And it's never as bad really as the first impression. You might be like, wow, this place, I guess if you come in the winter months, is so cold, or it's kind of dark or quiet, whatnot. It's also not as bad as it seems in a lot of cases, because it evolves and you adapt with time. So, and once you find that familiarity, everything changes, and that's what happened to me. After, I would say, a couple months, you kind of click into different things, different communities, and you're back being your familiar self with all the people that are around. And so I guess to answer the big question that I stated at the start of this video, why I chose Vancouver to settle in and to grow my career and my life. And I would say a lot of times you do think the grass is greener. When I was here growing up, I enjoyed it, all that, but I was like, ooh, I enjoy traveling. I've seen so many different countries. I could see myself living here, living here, living here. There's a lot of areas I could see myself living here, but then when I really think about it, I'm like, do I see myself living there, or is it more of just, I like being there for vacation? And a lot of times it's the latter. And then I guess if we take the most recent, which is Texas, compared to here, why did I end up choosing Vancouver? I would say even when I was there, I enjoyed it a tremendous amount. But every time I came back to Vancouver, I felt a sense of peace. And I don't know if that's related to me growing up and spending a lot of my childhood here, but there was a lot of peace in, I guess, related to the safety, related to the environment here, and just the quiet, peaceful living is something that I think it's quite special to this area, and that I tend to not find in a lot of other areas throughout, honestly, the world, that many places that I visited. And of course that's related to the geographical location, even here, if you're going to be in downtown or not. But overall, I think the sense of tranquility here is my personal biggest draw to why I chose to come back and live here in Vancouver. Now, that's about it. There you have it, guys. And I just want to take this moment. I have no idea how long this video is, probably like 30 plus minutes when I look back. But I want to thank you for watching this video and just really listening to me being transparent. being vulnerable and listening to my story. So I really appreciate that. And as much as I wanted to take off my realtor hat, I'm gonna put it on back on for just a second. I can't help it. But I do wanna say, for any of you that are struggling with the decision making, struggling with the process, you guys are considering making a move here, you want someone to talk to, someone to run through different options, different neighborhoods, what it's like, what you can expect, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm here to be a service for you. And as always, I'm gonna put my contact information right up there. And so again, don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to be of service to you, to be a conduit of information for any one of you that are considering making a move here. So once again, just checking that I didn't miss anything. I guess one last note before I let you guys go. I do put out a lot of content every single week that's going to help you with your decision. I'm going to show you a lot of neighborhoods, a lot of houses. So make sure you subscribe, like the video if you want to learn more, and just stay up to date, stay connected. Be the first to learn and to know, understand about what's going on in the market here so that you can make the most informed decision for yourself. Now, I double checked and I did not miss anything, I hope. So with that being said, once again, I appreciate you guys tuning in. And as always, I will see you in the next one. Peace.